Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What is up, Fantasy Champions? How we doing today? Just me today. Morgan's probably off celebrating and doing trick-or-treating maybe, because it is Halloween. Happy Halloween to everybody. So it is just me today, but we're going to recap the week, do maybe a little bit of waiver wires, and get you ready for the upcoming week. So welcome on in. We do have a lot to cover this week because we are going for a full recap and maybe a couple waiver wire pickups. So first, we're going to check out our website at fantasychampions.com. You want to follow us on Twitter and Instagram, like us on Facebook, Twitter at the FF Champs, Instagram at the Fantasy Champions, Facebook.com/the Fantasy Champs, TikTok at the FF Champs. If you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcast platform, please leave a review, share it with your friends. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, and like and comment. A little rusty there. Haven't done that in a minute. So with that said, that out of the way, let's not waste time here and let's dive right into it on this Halloween. So some big injuries this week. For my own fantasy team, I lost Kirk Cousins to an injury. And if you're in a league, quarterback is kind of scarce in a lot of leagues because of some injuries and some poor quarterback play. So if you don't have an elite quarterback, you're going to want to listen to the show. We're going to talk about some options that you can do. But first, let's recap the week. And I think there was a lot of good plays this week. Let me pull it up because I'm struggling right now. Might have to go on a different website, of course. Sleeper, I love you. You're doing the Halloween stuff for some of these guys. Like I don't know if you guys saw, but Patrick Mahomes was Kermit the Frog. I like it. I do. I like it. But, maybe you want to update some of your stuff. All right. Finally got it pulled up. So we're going to start at quarterback, top three performers. Number one, my guy. I wish Morgan was here so I could just, keep talking about it. Sam Howell, QB1 on the week, 30.98 fantasy points or 31 fantasy points. He's QB8 on the year. I will say he just loves to play the Eagles, though. He did pretty well in his first game against Philly with 20 fantasy points, and then this week with 30. The dude's honestly pretty good, startable on a week-to-week basis. He is still very inconsistent, but not a bad fantasy option. Number two, Josh Allen. I mean, of course, he's the guy. And then Dak Prescott finally shows up. First time this year. Actually, not really, because against the Chargers on Monday night, he did pretty good, 24 fantasy points and then 29. So last 2 weeks, Dak Prescott has come to life. He's got a good matchup against the Eagles, so you might want to keep riding him. A couple busts at the quarterback position. Desmond Ridder got benched this week. So if you were streaming him, I hope you weren't, because he got benched. And Arthur Smith, as of today, is not committing on a starting quarterback, so not good. I think they're probably going to roll with Taylor Heineke, but we'll see. Another bust, probably the biggest one of the week, is Patrick Mahomes. Now, I wasn't expecting a ton of big things this week from Mahomes. He was coming off such a monster week. He was in Denver, which was a good matchup, but it was a snow game. It was really bad weather. Usually not a lot of offense happens in those types of games. But it was worse than I thought, and the 2 interceptions, not good. The Chiefs' offense really doesn't look as elite as it has in the past. Obviously, I think having his wide receivers does not help. But I don't know. It's kind of interesting to see, and it's something to monitor. He did have, obviously, a monster week against the Chargers, but outside of that monster week 7, he's kind of been okay, a little underwhelming though. So keep your eye on that. He's got Miami this week. I do expect him to bounce back in a big way. And then the last bust I had was Lamar Jackson, who really didn't even have an awful game, but they were just in command that whole time against Arizona. It was very negative game script. He didn't really do much in the game other than the early touchdown. They ran the ball a lot. I think Gus Edwards had 2 goal line touchdowns. So One of those weeks where it's a good matchup on paper, but it's just it's not going to really put up a lot of fantasy numbers because of how the game script is going. Maybe some notable guys that I'll mention: Matt Stafford. Not great as a consistent start. I think I had him as my sit of the week. Obviously, we'll talk Kirk Cousins. Had a pretty good week before the injury. QB6 on the season through 8 weeks. Had a good season. Tore his Achilles. Huge loss. And we'll see how that plays out in terms of what the Vikings do going forward and what you have to do for your fantasy team. I'll also briefly mention another quarterback, Will Levis. 26 fantasy points, or 27 if you round up, and his debut against Atlanta. Big time. I don't expect Tannehill to get this job back. I actually thought they were going to trade Tannehill today, but we have passed the trade deadline and they held on to him. It'll be interesting to see, because Vrabel, I think his guy is Tannehill. I mean, I'm not really sure, so we'll see. I think this is Levis's job to lose now, though. After that debut, I think it's going to be his job going forward. But we'll see. And Thursday night's going to be a big test for him against that tough Steelers defense. So let's move on to running backs. Number one running back of the week, my guy, Jahmyr Gibbs. I held on to him in our home league, and I didn't really want to do it, but I did. Morgan kind of convinced me to do it. He was on our buy list a couple weeks ago in our buys and sells show. And with Montgomery out, he has some opportunity in these last 2 weeks, 27 and 30 fantasy points. He's kind of McCaffrey-like in the sense of his passing game work, or McCaffrey is always such a big name to compare to. So we'll say Kamara-like. He's been Kamara-like, which was the expectation going in and drafting him at 12th overall. You thought the Lions would use him this way. Is he going to get 26 carries a week? Definitely not. Is he going to get 30-plus touches a week? Definitely not. And I think, if you wanted to sell high on him, you could. But at the same time, I feel like after these 2 weeks, the Lions are going to, even when Montgomery comes back, they're going to have to use Gibbs more than they did in the beginning of the season. And I hope at least the passing game stays. And I think it will. And is he going to get 26 carries? No. But is he going to get 7? Hopefully not. Hopefully it's more like the week 7 game against Baltimore where he had 11 carries. And then 10 targets is obviously a lot, but maybe something like 11 carries and 6 or 7 targets a game. And I think I'd be happy with that on a PPR basis. Then McCaffrey, of course, he's Christian McCaffrey, RB1, best player in fantasy, arguably. And then Gus Edwards, as I mentioned earlier, had 2 goal line touchdowns. Monster last 2 weeks for Gus Edwards, and could be a good plug and play in some weeks. I don't think he's at the point where I'm starting him every week, but he's been really, really solid. And now when we go down here to the bus, there's a couple of guys to look at. Number one, I'm going to say Dalvin Cook. He's droppable. I don't know if he's still on your team or not. If he is, you need to drop him. There's really no point in him being on team. It's Breece Hall is now turning into the workhorse again, and he's just in the shadow. Alexander Mattison, 4 points. It's not looking good. Cam Akers and him are now in a split. He's just really inefficient. He's very touchdown reliant. You guys know my thoughts on Madison, but I'm not crazy about him. I'm not going to say drop him. I'm not at that point, but he should be staying on your bench. Dameon Pierce. I said this week I liked Dameon Pierce. I liked the matchup, but if he didn't have a good week, it might be time to look in another direction. And he was really bad this week. He hasn't had a target in 2 weeks. He has 2 catches in his last 4 games. He's a 0 in the pass game, so he has to score a rushing touchdown to be fantasy relevant, or have like 100-plus yards to be fantasy relevant on the ground. And he's not doing that. He's right now in a split backfield with Devin Singletary. It's gross. So Dameon Pierce is a no-go. I think, if you want to drop him, I'm not going to hate you for it. Obviously, deeper competitive leagues, like 12-team leagues with multiple flex spots, you don't want to drop him. But in a typical 10-man league with 1 flex, I wouldn't hate the idea of dropping Dameon Pierce. He's kind of dead to me. And then one last guy, probably Tony Pollard, 6.5 points. Don't love that, but I think he'll bounce back. We look at the wide receiver positions, top 3 guys. CeeDee Lamb, this is the Morgan week at wide receiver. We got CeeDee Lamb with 41 points. It's funny, he was telling me that he has CeeDee Lamb in a lot of dynasty leagues, and I played him in 2 dynasty leagues this week, and I think he scored 180 in both those leagues, and he had CeeDee Lamb in both those leagues. So CeeDee Lamb winning a lot of people weeks. Finally had an explosive game. He's been okay this year, but he just hasn't had that monster game outside of maybe week 2. But he's been kind of living at like 10, he had 11, 24, which was great, but then 10, 14, 9, 18. He's kind of just been decent, but this week finally putting up monster numbers, and he's now wide receiver 10 on the season with a bye. So he's finally wide receiver 1 after this week, and well deserved. I think he was a good draft pick on draft night for teams, and I think finally kind of making that a well-earned pick. And I'm glad, because the Cowboys were talking about using tight ends more, and it was so stupid because you just got to get CeeDee Lamb the ball. He's your best player on offense. DeAndre Hopkins is alive. Who would have thought? Maybe I have to apologize, and Morgan's not here, but to Morgan and the DeAndre Hopkins people, because with a real quarterback, or I don't know if Will Levis is a real quarterback or not, but at least them throwing the ball down the field, he made plays still. And I called DeAndre Hopkins not necessarily washed, but not the same player. But he had a really, really good weekend. I'm very interested to see going forward if he can keep this up with Will Levis. So really good week. He still only had 4 catches, which I don't love, but 3 of them were touchdowns. So that's great for DeAndre Hopkins owners. And then A.J. Brown, the dude has been on a tear. I thought last year, he emerged as that true wide receiver 1. And there was debates about him and CeeDee Lamb in the draft. I was more on CeeDee Lamb's side, but I was okay with either at that turn at the end of the first round. Boy, was I wrong. I mean, A.J. Brown is a freaking machine. Since week 3, ever since that game where he was complaining, I think it was Thursday night against Minnesota, I believe he's the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. So he has been a monster and one of the best players in fantasy football. Side note, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle come in 4th and 5th this week. So Dolphins receivers, man. Tyreek Hill is wide receiver 1 on the season. Those guys have lit it up. Now to some busts. There's a couple different guys we could choose from here. But I think the number 1 guy is obviously Devontae Adams. Very interesting to see. He was open on some plays last night, and Garoppolo just didn't hit him, and it was kind of tough to watch. I think he's still a good player, and I'm going to say I do like him rest of the season, because we saw first 3 weeks him putting up some big numbers still, and he's had some inconsistent play at quarterback. But, he's probably not the guy that you wanted when you drafted him, but I still think he's going to be a top 12 receiver rest of season. Maybe a low end on that, he might be like around 12, but still like him, and if you can buy low on him, I would do it. Yeah, and then, we could talk about more Raiders receivers. Jacoby Myers as well, 3 points. Just absolutely tough to watch the Raiders last night. That was brutal if you're a Raiders fan. That offense blows. And it's a shame, because I think Josh McDaniels is a good offensive coordinator, but as a head coach, it's just tough. Cooper Kupp, another big name with a bust. Back-to-back 6-point weeks. The targets are still kind of there, 7 and 10 targets, so I don't mind that. Again, he's another guy. If you can buy low on him, do it. I think we might have passed the point in Cooper Kupp's career of him being the Triple Crown guy, the bona fide wide receiver 1 in all of fantasy, even a top 3 guy. I think there's other guys out there I'd rather have, but he's still Cooper Kupp, still wide receiver 1. If you can buy low, go ahead, do it. I think these 6-point weeks will be in the rearview mirror very soon, and I think he bounces back against Green Bay. Christian Watson is another guy. Really disappointing to see. I think it is more on Jordan Love, though. I've been watching some Packers games last couple weeks, and I bought into the Jordan Love hype in the first couple games of the season, and then I started watching more Packers games closer, and I realized how wrong I was, because Jordan Love has been awful to start the season. There's plays to be made. He's not making them. I wish Christian Watson, though, there's times where, he throws jump balls to him and he's kind of not really going to get the ball. And at 6'4", you kind of want your receiver to go do that on some of these jump balls. But outside of that, like, there's plays where he's open and Jordan Love is just not hitting him. So rest of the season, I don't love Christian Watson. I think the panic meter is probably at like a 6 out of 10. I still have some hope. He is on my fantasy team, so, and I might, now that Kendrick Bourne towards ACL as well, I might have to keep starting him at my second flex, but we'll see how that goes. One more guy probably, or we could talk about quickly, Zay Flowers. Only 7 points this week. He's been okay, but I think the hype is starting to kind of drop a little bit with Zay, but I still like him. Still think he can bounce back. There's just a lot going on in the Ravens offense. Like, they like to spread the ball when Odell and Bateman are out there. And even though Zay is the main target, if they don't throw the ball a lot, then he's not going to have big weeks, because you also have to account for Mark Andrews. So this week they were, again, kind of what I was talking about earlier. The Ravens were dominating that game, so not a lot of passing opportunity because of that hurt Zay Flowers. But he's still Zay Flowers. I still like him. Nico Collins had a little bit of a disappointing week. He's kind of been up and down all year. Puka as well, the Rams. Man, tough week for the Rams. That's about it. We'll quickly talk about tight ends. So Trey McBride just picked him up. I hope you did pick him up. I think we mentioned him last week on our Waiver Wire show. With Zach Ertz going to IR, he was going to get a lot of opportunity. This was crazy, though. 14 targets, 10 catches. I wasn't necessarily expecting that. And I don't think he's going to be that going forward. But with the tight end market the way it is, he could be a good plug and play on a week-to-week basis until Zach Ertz comes back. Because you also got Kyler Murray potentially coming back this week. And even if it's Clayton Tune for this week, I don't love it. It's Cleveland too, so that might be an absolute massacre. But young quarterbacks usually like to go to the tight end position. So I think he could be, in PPR, he could be okay because maybe he gets like 4 or 5 catches. But might be a tough week this week. But then at week 10 against Atlanta, I like him. Week 11 against Houston, I like him. So going forward, I do like Trey McBride, but we'll see when Zach Ertz comes back. Then we got George Kittle. Obviously, the dude is the most up and down player in the world at tight end position. He has his big weeks. He has his bad weeks. 16. I mean, if you go back to week 3, 16, 1, 27, 1, 13, 23, or 24. So he's inconsistent, but that's what you got signing up for George Kittle. And then you got Taysom Hill at number 3. Is kind of annoying. The dude is not even a real tight end, but it's kind of a hack, because you can just put him in at tight end, and if he gets a rushing touchdown or passing touchdown or whatever, you get those fantasy points. And at the tight end position, again, how weak it is, that's going to work out for you. Some busts at tight end. There's a couple guys I think I wanted to mention. Let me see here. Hunter Henry, I think, is probably irrelevant at this point. Kyle Pitts, it's tough to see, man. He's not doing great. I have hopes with Taylor Heineke that maybe he can be okay, but he's tight end 12 on the season. And it kind of blows. I think he is what he is, right? He's 7 fantasy points a week type of guy. As he gets touchdown. Dallas Goedert, a little bit disappointing, 7.6 points. But probably didn't kill you. And then this really isn't a bust. It's still a good week, but a little bit disappointing. That's Travis Kelce at 11.8. Which is crazy to say that that's a bad week for Travis Kelce. He's still a beast, tight end 1. But maybe a little bit disappointing. Just that Chiefs offense as a whole was tough. So now we're going to go to the waiver wire. Some guys that are trending on Sleeper, and some guys that are maybe trending down as well. The number 1 trending player on Sleeper is Will Levis, and I briefly brought him up, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do as someone who had Kirk Cousins. I'm putting in a bid for Will Levis. I'm in a 12-team league, and a lot of those teams have backup quarterbacks as well as their starters. So the quarterback market is very thin, and for me, I did not have a backup behind Kirk Cousins. So Picking up Will Levis to me is huge. Thankfully, I don't think there's going to be huge competition for him, but you never know. You still, if you need a quarterback, put in a bet or a good bid because, he might suck. I think that, he's not going to get the 26 a week or whatever that he got. But he has potential to be a weekly starter. His rushing upside is there. He likes to throw the ball down the field, which is good for fantasy because if he throws a pick, it's not the end of the world. And he could have a lot of big plays, which could account for big fantasy numbers. So I do like Will Levis, and he's worth a shot, worth a flyer pickup if you need a quarterback. Maybe not start him right away, but he's definitely worth a flyer if you need a quarterback. Trey McBride obviously brought him up. If he's not already owned in your league and you need tight end, go do that. Leonard Fournette, number 3 ad, according to Sleeper right now. I'm not as crazy about that. He's kind of in a timeshare with, and I think James Cook is still the guy there in Buffalo, and then Latavius Murray's going to be the goal line back, and that just kind of leaves Fournette as a change of pace back. So I'm not really crazy about that. Maybe if you're in a super deep league, he might be worth a pickup. Or if you have James Cook, maybe you think he could be a handcuff for you, whatever you want to do. But I'm not trying to pick up Fournette. There's Jaron Hall at quarterback. Expected to start this week. We'll see how that goes. If he has a good week, he might remain the starter. But with Josh Dobbs coming in, and I think they have Nick Mullins as well, I don't think he's going to remain the starter, but who knows. But obviously, I wouldn't pick him up in a normal redraft league. Demario Douglas comes in at number 6. He might be my favorite out of the week at wide receiver. He hasn't done anything crazy this year, but if you've watched any Patriots games, it's clear he's their most talented wide receiver. And now with Kendrick Bourne out with a torn ACL, he's officially going to be their wide receiver 1 going forward, and he has a lot of great matchups. That Patriots offense blows, I know, but in PPR leagues, I mean, he could start getting like double-digit targets a week and could end up getting 6 to 7 catches every single week. And in PPR league, he does not need to score touchdowns for him to be decent and getting double-digit points every single week. I think he could be a good flex going forward and should be picked up in every PPR league. We got Derek Carr, who's whatever. I mean, he could be a good stream at quarterback this week if he's available. Taysom Hill probably should be picked up at this point. A couple defenses. Raheed Shaheed comes in at number 11. I've been kind of bullish on him, and I still am bullish on him because he's very inconsistent. That said, it's clear that he's their deep ball threat. So in good matchups, if you want to plug and play him, I'm not going to hate you on that. He had 24 this week against Colts. He's got the Bears and Vikings coming up, which are 2 good matchups. So could be decent, and I think he's probably worth a roster spot. You got Khalil Shakir coming off a big week. I'm not going out of my way to pick him up. Did have a really nice week, but still the wide receiver 3 on that team with a lot of competition. You got Sam Howell at number 14. Should absolutely already be on teams. Jahan Dotson at number 15. He's an interesting one. I would pick him up. I still think he's a talented player, but still very inconsistent. I wouldn't trust him to just pick him up and start him. But he should probably be rostered after that big week. But I'm not, going out of my way for him. You got Clayton Tune, Dalton Kincaid, who should already be on team, Logan Thomas, Josh Dobbs. None of those guys really excite me. And just going down the list here, Gus Edwards is on this list. If he's available in your league, he needs to be on a roster. I think we had said that after last week. Even though I'm not too confident with starting him every week. That's about it for noticeable players to add. I will say Jaden Reed is down here. I do kind of like Jaden Reed. He's, with the Packers, I hate their offense, and I'm not a fan of Jordan Love right now from what I'm seeing because he's had some good matchups, and it's just disappointing. But Jaden Reed has made some plays. He's living at around 11 to 12 fantasy points. He's a nice little receiver. The Packers it doesn't seem like Jordan Love has a wide receiver 1. It seems like Watson, Reed, and Dobbs all kind of get around like 6 to 8 targets a game. All 3 of them kind of split that role. They run a lot of those 3 wide receiver sets. in their passing offense. So I would pick up Reed, but I'm not spending any waiver budget on it. But he's worth a pickup, worth a bench stash. Josh Downs is still on this list. I don't know why if he's available in your league, obviously you must pick up. And I think we've been saying that for weeks with Gardner Minshew, because Gardner Minshew loves to give him the ball. Kyler Murray, the bottom of this list, should absolutely be picked up in deep leagues if he's available. If you need a quarterback, you had Kirk Cousins, I would pick up Kyler Murray for sure. And then the trending down, obviously we don't have to talk about a lot of the injuries. Guys like Kirk Cousins, Kendrick Bourne, Deonta Foreman trending down. Could probably drop him. Matt Stafford trending down. He probably shouldn't be available in your league, but I still am okay with him as a streaming option potentially on some weeks, but not going out of my way for him. And let's see, Curtis Samuel trending down. He kind of is what he is. Jeff Wilson trending down. This is probably a good one. I think by the time Devin A-Chain comes back, he might end up being a healthy scratch. He was injured to start the year. He came back. A lot of people picked him up, but he's not really getting used that much. And like I said, once A-Chain comes back, I think he goes back to not playing. Jameson Williams, I traded him this week to Morgan in our home league for waiver budget. I'm very done with him. Can he play in the NFL? Maybe one day. Can he play in the NFL right now? I don't really think so. I mean, he clearly has talent. He's extremely fast. He's able to get open because of his speed, but the dude cannot catch anything. I mean, he reminds me of Nelson Aguilar in the beginning of his career, or Jalen Reagor, which is not a good sign at all. The talent is there, though, so if he can figure it out, go ahead. But at this point, he has absolutely zero fantasy value, in my opinion. If you want to pick him up and stash him, though, or trade for him for cheap like Morgan did, I'm not going to hate you for it. You got the extra bench spot, go right ahead. But to me, kind of just worthless at this point. Miles Sanders is a big one, trending down. A lot of people are dropping him. I wouldn't hate you for that. I am interested to see. He didn't really play this week. He had two carries for 0 yards. He had 18% snap percentage. And Chuba Hubbard was the guy. I'm interested to see if that's because of him returning from the injury and if he was just limited in his workload, or if that's what it's going to be going forward. So again, if you're in a 10-person league, go ahead and drop him. But if you're in like a 12-person league, a little bit of a deeper league, don't drop him yet. Put him on your bench and kind of see how that plays out. But he's disappointing before that anyway. So kind of tough for the Miles Sanders people. And that seems about it. I think that's good for the show. If you have any questions, comments about who to pick up, who to maybe start for this upcoming week, go ahead and drop that. But outside of that, I think we're done. So don't forget to check out our website at thefantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and we will talk to you tomorrow, Fantasy Champs, and we'll get you ready for Thursday. See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at TheFFChamps.